listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Hey, good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League daily episode for May 3rd, 2018. We're going to jump into the show in just a second, but I want to take a minute and address a few things about the show moving forward. As you may have noticed, it's been a few weeks since our last episode. The short and sweet of it is I couldn't afford to actually do the show 5 days a week. I had to take a little break to figure out the show's future, do some job interviews, and well, a plan is in place and the show is back, but it's going to look a little different than it has in the past. So here's what's changing. Starting this week, Overwatch League Daily will be going down to a minimum of 2 episodes a week. It's unlikely to see more than 3 or 4, but I want to leave it open that there might be an opportunity for more episodes depending on the availability of guests and what my week looks like. I am taking on a new part-time job outside of esports, so there just really isn't enough hours in the day to write, produce, host, and edit the show every single day. But you can help change that. If you like the show, consider supporting via our new and improved Patreon. I'll be adding back additional episodes as we hit certain support goals and can afford to dedicate more time to more episodes. We also have new perks that include access to audio episodes early, game nights, and your chance to become a producer of the show. So check it out by going to patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. I think the perks are really cool. On another note, I am currently campaigning for the Overwatch World Cup Community Lead for the United States. A huge part of being community lead is creating content and facilitating community and communicating with the community. Something that I think that this show does really well. So if you like the show and the content I create, I can commit to doing this type of thing for our Overwatch World Cup team for the United States. Click on the link in the show notes below and cast your vote for me. I said that if I made it past the preliminary voting stages and made it to the top 10, I will rap why you should vote for me. So at least you get a free rap out of it, I guess. All I have to do is make it into the top 10 there. So thank you all again. Okay, that's enough housekeeping. We've got to go. Keep moving. Let's do our 2-minute rundown brought to you by our patrons at patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. We're in the final week of Stage 3, and there's a lot of competition for the 4th and final spot for the stage playoffs. On the cusp of qualifying is the Philadelphia Fusion, who are taking on the 1-7 Dallas Fuel. The first half of this match was honestly one of the more odd ones we've seen, as neither team would complete Anubis or Nimbani. The Fuel held the Fusion to just 1 point on Anubis before getting full held, and on Nimbani, the Fuel hold the Fusion on point A, but the Fusion put up an even stronger defense and full hold the Fuel. Going into halftime, it's 2-0 in favor of the Fusion, but that was it for these weird map scenarios, as the Fusion would win on Nepal before dropping map 4 to the Dallas Fuel. The Fusion win 3 maps to 1. For the second match of the evening, the LA Gladiators would defeat the Florida Mayhem 3 maps to 0, with the tie taking place on Temple of Anubis. After this match, the LA Gladiators are 6-3 with a +8 map differential. The Fusion are 5-4 with a +2 map differential. In order for the Gladiators to lose their playoff spot, a lot of weird things need to happen. The Valiant would need to be nearly swept in both of their matches this week. The Fusion would have to near sweep, and the Gladiators would have to take a deep loss to the Uprising. For the final match of the evening, the struggling Outlaws, who came into this match at 4-4, look to take on the San Francisco Shock, who had a rough week 4 against NYXL and the London Spitfire. This one would go the distance as both teams traded maps until we went to a tiebreaker on Nepal. According to Winston's Lab, the Outlaws have a 62.5% win rate on the map, while the Shock only have a 44% win rate. Despite the advantage, it would be the Shock winning the map and the series and improving to 5-4 for the stage. Coming up tomorrow, we have the Shock going up against the Florida Mayhem, the Uprising taking on the Valiant, and the Dallas Fuel going up against NYXL. Games start at 4 p.m. Pacific at overwatchleague.com. All right, we're caught up. Today I sat down with Volamel to discuss yesterday's matches and some of the bigger playoff and stage 4 implications. Volamel, welcome back, dude. It's been honestly like 2 weeks. We did Open Division together, right? We did a little Overwatch League analyst desk pseudo tryharding on that. I think we did okay. I think it was all right.
Yeah, I thought it was good overall. I thought we had some good synergy. We played off each other pretty well.
Yeah, we've been training for this. That's what this show has been. We've been training.
We were born for this.
Exactly. So let's talk about Overwatch League. We had 3 pretty interesting matches. Not all of them had huge playoff implications or anything else, but they were all still pretty interesting to watch. Thank goodness. Avoided the 4-0s, and that's always nice when you're dealing with the show. Let's talk about the Fusion versus the Fuel first. And I want to talk about the first half, I think, more than the second half, because it was a really interesting first half. And that was, like, on Anubis, they had the strong defensive hold, and then the Fuel got full held on offense, and then we saw an initial composition that was a triple tank with Roadhog and McCree by the Fuel on offense. Any ideas on what that strategy might have been?
So it's a theme that they tried to consistently run throughout the entirety of that first half and leading into the second half. Was this very slow, kind of sustained composition. If it wasn't the McCree, they would have AKM play the Soldier 76 as well. But for Anubis in particular, what I think they were trying to play up to was the kind of close quarteredness that the staged left-hand side gives you. So the mega pack and, the platform, that kind of area on Temple A. That allows you to get better use out of Fan the Hammer, because you're going to get just more accuracy because it's just so tight-knit and so close quarters. But you're also going to get great Fan the Hammers. The problem that they were running into was kind of escorting the McCree through that kind of corridor, through, I believe it was EQO's, just random, Junkrat mines. Obviously, it's not random.
Snillo, I think, was running the Junkrat.
Sure, it was Snillo. It was just rough for them to get through the Junkrat in particular. And it's odd because I would imagine that you'd want to run, and again, this is just me kind of theory crafting on the fly. Once you kind of push that once or twice and you realize that you're having a hard time getting through that, I wonder maybe if the swap to Lucio was a play that they could have made. Or better planned use of where Mickey's defense matrix could have been used to kind of mark the Junkrat and really kind of negate him in that hallway. But overall, it was just, Dallas has never been a dive team. They've always kind of struggled with that, and obviously with the internal turmoil that they've been going under, it's been difficult for them to kind of really get down that synergy. So they kind of took it back to basics. They took it back to what everybody kind of is known to play, and just kind of ran with comfort picks. And, to be fair to them, it worked out pretty well.
So when you're looking at the offensive spawn, they tried to go pretty consistently into that right room, which is kind of a Junkrat paradise, if you will, right? You've got, especially without really any shields. Do you think that there was any, if they were expecting that Junkrat, if they thought maybe Roadhog and McCree might have been enough to deal with that Junkrat, and then we just saw Snillo kind of play more passively? You saw Snillo almost the whole time taking these really kind of odd angles that you aren't used to seeing a Junkrat set up on.
Yeah, it was. I think they were going for the kind of pick potential to where maybe they knew that Snell was going to be playing on these off angles. They went to try and get like a cheeky flashbang or a cheeky hook. That could very well be the case. It's hard to say, obviously, but it was rough to say the least. But overall, again, I felt like the comfort picks really did lend themselves to this team. I think everybody. It showed improvement out of Dallas, which is something that we've been looking for 3 or 4 weeks now.
Something interesting on the Fusion side is Carpe, or the lack thereof Carpe. I I think it's a pretty fair assumption to say that the Fusion, assuming that they play semi-consistently, weren't super worried about losing to the Fuel. And we've seen teams do this in the past when they've got two teams that they play every week. Sometimes that they'll, give their quote-unquote all-stars a rest, or they'll prepare certain parts of their rosters for certain matchups to be able to kind of mitigate some of the grindiness of playing so much competitive Overwatch week in and week out. For sure. But they are fighting with the Gladiators and the Outlaws, the Fusion are, for that fourth spot. At least they were before last night. I mean, why wouldn't you? Is there a reason for you if you're looking to be a coach, and assuming it's not like, oh, he's sick, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah, we get it, he's sick. But assuming that wasn't the case, why would you not play Carpe here?
I think I guess there's two different angles that I would take with this. The first one being the kind of, the angle of burnout, which they did say on broadcast, but there again, what is said and what actually is happening are two very different things. Who's to know? Or, it could be very truthful, but, we can never know for sure. That being said, Carpe has been a giant staple of the Philadelphia Fusion. When he does well, they look amazing. And when, Carpe fails to find his footing, they tend to suffer a little bit. So I can imagine that there's a lot of pressure on this young kid's shoulders. He's uprooted and coming over to a new country and new food and no friends, no family, like very little support system that he's kind of grown up with. So I think that, it could be weighing on him and he's requesting to be kind of pulled back a little bit, or it could be the fact that the other three DPS players, Snillo, EQO, and Shadowburn are requesting a little bit more game time, which I think is fair. And, like you said, Fuel aren't necessarily the toughest competitors in the stage right now. No shade to Fuel. There have been improving, but, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Dallas has been a little rough. So getting new blood in there, giving people play time, allowing them to succeed, could be one of those points. Or it could just be that, I would hate to say it, but maybe there could be behavioral issues. I don't necessarily see it, but yeah. It's always a possibility. Maybe there's some bickering going on behind the scenes and, they pulled him for some reason. And there again, it could just be that he's sick, like you said. So I would lean on the kind of first point that maybe they're just trying to rotate in new players, give them a break. But yeah, that's kind of where my headspace is at. And
the Valiant, they play the Valiant later this week, and that's going to be a pretty big match as they continue. Basically, they can't. I have to remember that they have to do really well against the Valiant if they have any chance at making playoffs, and the Gladiators have to basically be swept. So maybe they're saving Carpe. It's like, you know what? Let's get a good 3-0, 3-1, whatever. Let's go to. Let's worry about the Valiant here. So who knows? We'll have to see. But last but not least, let's talk about the Fuel once more. And that is, the Fuel are now, I believe, tied. It hasn't updated yet, but I think I did the math right. They're either tied or within one map plus or minus of the Shanghai Dragons for the worst map differential in this stage. What's going on in Dallas? We've got OGE now. We're seeing kind of this new Dallas Fuel 2.0, but it doesn't look like things are quite sticking yet. Yeah, it's a little rough when you let your star player go on vacation for a brief bit and you kind of use stage 3 as a punching bag to try new things. So it is rough to kind of judge them based on this. We have seen OGE. He has looked to improve the team, and it's been a relative success on that front, mechanically speaking. Whether or not they're gelling as a team, it's hard to say. There are times where they are still very, very disjointed. And it just lacks a leadership. I feel like it lacks structure that I felt like Custa brought to that team, and I'm still very, very sad that, they got rid of him. There again, Effect is in Korea. Hopefully he is getting the rest and relaxation he needs to come back and, dominate. But
But we have seen Coco come out, which is great. I'm glad to see him play, and it hasn't looked too bad. I think they're slowly easing him into the swing of things again, and hopefully we'll be using him, especially coming into stage 4, but the map pool leaning, and lots of predictions leaning towards more of a tank-centric metagame, featuring Reinhardt on specific maps, and then you still get your Winston at times. So it is still the same problems with Dallas, lack of structure, lack of direction. At least that's what it feels like from the outside looking in. I would love to be a fly on the wall and actually know what's going on. But it's, for my money, it's still that lack of leadership and structure to really get everybody on the same page and really start to work from the ground floor up.
Interesting. Well, let's transition over to the Mayhem versus the Gladiators. And sure. The Gladiators are slotted in for the stage 3 playoffs. And barring, as we said earlier, a few exceptional circumstances where they get swept, the Fusion sweep, something like that, they're likely going to clinch that 4th spot. But you mentioned in this one here that the Gladiators looked pretty sloppy. What made you think that?
They were all over the place. I think that this is probably the worst performance for this Gladiators roster, with Fissure being added in since he has been acquired by the team. It was rough, to say the least. They were all over the place. Their dives weren't what they normally are. Their support ultimates weren't what they normally are. It looked very suspect, and I think that was a giant wake-up call that they can't maybe not sleep on teams, because obviously they played against the Florida Mayhem, who have been on the uptick, but they're again have been a weaker team overall. So I think I hope this has been a wake-up call for them to really get back to what drove them to this position and really start to look at what they could do to really push into playoffs, because I think they have the potential to make a great playoff run. They have the pieces there. They have an amazing, DPS trio. They have an amazing tank player who pulls wins out of God knows where. 2 of the best support players coming out of Europe from 2017. The team on paper looks to be amazing, but they really need to get everybody on the same page to put that plan into action.
So you brought up Fissure, or alluded to Fissure, in saying that he has the ability to pull wins out of nowhere, and he does. Bishu's a great off tank. He's honestly one of my personal favorites, but also I think one of the strongest, and I think really helps initiate a lot of the situations that we see Fissure do so well in. But since adding Fissure, the Gladiators have gone from kind of a lower middle of the pack team to a team that I think you can definitely make the argument that they're a top 5 team, if not a top 4 team. I mean, obviously in stage 3, they're a top 4 team. What impacts did Fissure make in this series?
Well, obviously there's the one play in particular on Nimbani, point C, I believe it is, where he pops Primal Rage to secure what was, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe it was a 6v4 in favor of the Mayhem. He pops Primal Rage and gets a triple kill, which swings it in their favor. I believe they might get a res in between that as well, which again puts them at a very high advantage, and they win a fight that they had no business winning whatsoever. And it's a consistent thing with him. Yes, his team definitely does set him up for success, but it takes someone with that kind of trigger finger, I would say, with that kind of just kill mentality, that kind of brutal mentality to just immediately just act on instinct and just jump in and really get those crazy plays. And it's something that, again, it happens continuously, and he's just, what can you say? I hate to meme, but who's better than Fissure? It's rough when he's on. He looks like the best tank player in the world. Yeah,
definitely, and he's pretty much always on, which is also a nice thing. He's pretty consistently on. It's nice when you have an all-star who isn't really streaky. Carpe. Anyways, I'm just kidding. Carpe, I would say outside of recent memory, he's been really consistent. But anyways, let's go back. I want to go back. Gladiators play Boston on Friday. Boston are on the verge of clinching a perfect stage, and I believe NYXL did that in stage 2, but that's the only team who's done that in Overwatch League so far. They don't need to win against Boston to clinch the playoffs, but they need to be safely in the playoffs. They need to keep it close. How can the Gladiators steal a win or keep it close against the Uprising, who are obviously playing some of the best Overwatch we've seen in Overwatch League so far?
Definitely. Boston has been on an upswing. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. Granted, they have kept games pretty close with some of the harder teams, but they are the first team, if I remember correctly, to beat all of the major Korean teams, that being NYXL, London, and Seoul. And they are just, dominating through this stage, and they look to be playing some of the most clean Overwatch, on top of being some of the most talented, players in the league, Striker, Gamsu, Neko, one of the most unsung support players in the league, probably next to maybe Sleepy. How does Gladiators do this? I think they have to play out of their mind. When I kind of draw this up in my head, you look at a team who is kind of like a tornado of answers to questions. They have all of the answers. They have plays on plays, that deviate to more plays, and they just have this massive playbook that they can draw up at any point and just run crisp, defined strategies to decimate your backline. Whether it's dive, majority of the time it is dive, to kind of put it frankly. It is dive most of the times, but the little nuances to their dive and how directly, it's hard to say anything other than crispy word, but it's effective. So if Gladiators is to break the machine that is Boston, they have to throw them a wrench, whether that's, creative strategy, whether that's, multiple players playing, out of this world, and to Gladiators' credit, they have the players that can do that. If Surefour just gets on Widowmaker and just goes crazy and, Fissure does what Fissure does, this could be insanely close. What can't happen is what happened today against Mayhem. If they come into this with the mentality that, the same mentality that they gave Florida, I think Boston is going to roll over them 4-0, and it's not going to be close. But if they come into this and they play very, very well, I could, in a very slim universe, maybe like 20% chance, I could see Gladiators actually taking this in a best of 5. I think this goes 5 maps if, they're on, regardless. But I think there's about a 20% chance that Gladiators win this. But again, bottom line, you have to play amazing or you have to give them some sort of curveball.
This could be interesting. I need to check right now, actually, which maps they end up playing on, because that actually might be...
That matters quite a bit.
Especially because... So they do go to Volskaya, which Boston, it's Uprising Industries, right?
Yes.
And I was going to say, if they don't get Volskaya, hey...
They have a chance,
maybe they can take this one. But you... at this point are basically starting down 0-1. So hopefully, like you said, stranger things have happened, right? We saw NYXL choke in stage 1 finals. We've seen lots of just kind of weird
MVP space beat Lunatic High, like that. I've seen stranger things happen. Mickey gets added to Envious in Apex Season 1 and they win the whole dang thing. Like, yeah, I've seen stranger things happen. This wouldn't be the most jaw-dropping thing I've seen.
Right. And they're preparing for it. So the last match of the evening was the Shock versus the Houston Outlaws. And the Shock have had a really strong stage 3. In stage 1 and stage 2, they went 3-7. And I believe they had almost identical map differentials as well. Like, I think it was -7 or -8. Here they are, 5-4, beating the Outlaws. They've got Architect, Super, Sinatra, and Moth all in now. They're all in the rotation. Is this a team? Do you believe that this is a team that can contend going into stage 4, hitting those top, let's say top 5?
I mean, they have the potential to. It's so hard to say for sure because we still don't really know. I don't want to say a lot, but we don't know, obviously, some key factors. Is Brigitte going to come in? What patch is it going to be played on? Because, PTR apparently has gone down recently, so we don't know if, a live patch is coming shortly, which means that the Hanzo rework is coming in and that Lucio could be changed. Who knows? We'll see what ends up happening with that. But it's really difficult to say based on what the metagame could look like. I think they have the potential for sure. They have the duo of the boy wonders. You've got Architect coming in, performing, exceeding, my expectations. You look at the kid. He's looked at times the world's best Genji or, within the top 2 or 3. And now he pulls out Sombra and McCree and Pharah and Widowmaker. And, who knew that this kid could pull this kind of hero pool out from absolutely just out of nowhere? So I think that they have quite a variety of different things that they can play. Super, again, incredibly flexible. He off-rolls quite well. It depends. It's hard to say. I think they can, but if the meta is going to be that drastic, which I don't think it is, but if by chance it does, if it is that drastic, it could really hamstring this team because it is going to kind of even everybody out, and it could take the wind out of their sails. So I would say they could possibly, that is kind of a scapegoat answer,
sure,
or like a cop out, but
not 9
I think they definitely
of the 12 Overwatch teams could possibly.
Yes, exactly.
But I get what you're saying, and I know I always like to ask you those really tough crystal ball questions because I need something to make fun of you for later
for
on.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
In our Discord. So, hey, remember that time you said
you predicted
the Shot were a top 5 team? Well,
and they're 12th, and they lost.
Right. They pull a fuel. Let's talk about the Outlaws, because if there's a team that has kind of contrasted the shock, it's kind of been the Outlaws. They've kind of been on a downward trajectory.
For sure.
And in this one, Outlaws came up just short, which is kind of weird for them considering the tiebreakers control. But besides that, what ended up being the difference maker in this match that made them just come up short?
To unpack it, I kind of want to start from, what expectations were coming into stage 3. We know Outlaws, they have a known quantity. They are a known quantity. They have one of the best Junkrat players in Overwatch League, right? And when you look at this map pool leading into stage 3, you look at this and you go, wow, Outlaws really got a favor. They can pull out some wins here because a lot of these maps that they can play really favor to their hero pool. And it's kind of surprising to me that they're struggling as hard as they are. If I had to say, a good and a bad thing, because I think that when you pose the question of a difference maker, I do want to give kudos to some of the Shock players, but I also do want to highlight what is kind of happening in my mind for the Outlaws, and I think that really stems from their inconsistency. At times they look really, really good. They look very clean. Their maps, they were undefeated on Junkertown up until I think they played Philly, and they kind of got a little lackadaisical and kind of threw that map away. But overall, they have the map pool to really flex that hero pool, and it just it feels like a dice roll of what Houston you're getting. And it's scary when you look at their bench, which is becoming an increasingly large factor for a lot of these teams. Their midseason pickups don't necessarily fill or fix that issue. I don't know that Arhan has ever been the most consistent player. You're throwing him in a team with, people who don't necessarily speak his language or vice versa, so that starts to break down that communication. Not to mention, where do you fill him in? Do you rotate out your leader in Jake to put Arhan in, and then who leads your team? There's a lot of questions around that. Where's Mendo? How do we fit Spree in more often? To kind of answer that sub question, I think that he's definitely going to be playing in stage 4 quite a bit. But I digress. I think that Houston just really needs to figure out what's happening with their consistency, and that's a very, very vague and broad question, and it could be attributed to a lot of things, but it feels systemic, and it feels like they need to kind of pivot off certain things, and because this was their time. This was their time to shine. Junkertown, Blizzard World, they had the map pool, and it's been a chance squandered. So I think that they really need to take a look internally and figure out what's happening.
And that's going to be, this might be a redundant question. We might just skip over it, but I'm going to ask you it anyway. Like I said before, pretty downward trajectory from their stage 1 and stage 2 performances. They go from the runner-up in stage 2 to where they are now, currently in 7th in the league overall. Just outside, so end of season playoffs is top 6 teams. They're in 7th right now. What do they need to do to address changes they need to make in order to get there and sneak into that top 6? So I know there's some redundancies there.
Yeah. I'll take it, and I'll try to make it fairly interesting. What do they need to change?
I appreciate that.
What do they need to change? Obviously, touching on that last question, I do think they need to really look internally, and I think the solution could come from the bench. As much as I'm not a big fan of Arhan, I can't say that I was thoroughly impressed. He had his moments in Apex that were definitely, this kid has talent. There's no doubt about it. And I don't think Tyrone would bring him on board if he didn't think he was good after working with him for multiple seasons of Apex. Can he be the fire that lights this team up? It's possible. They have been a fairly passive team when it comes to engaging in certain areas. So I think that coming into stage 4, it's hard for me, again, to really predict the meta. But if it is going to be tanks, I don't know exactly where he fits in. But if it doesn't end up being that, and people are a little bit trigger happy or a little bit aggressive with their opinions on Brigitte, he could see a lot of play, and he could be the kind of figurative leader that Outlaws needs to kind of propel them forward. He could be their fraggy, right, to really begin those initiations, and with multiple people, Sideshow included. Talking about how the DPS players for most of these teams are starting to engage these fights, and that's maybe the calling structure that a lot of these Overwatch League teams are pushing towards. It could make Arhan an invaluable resource. If the communication can be ironed out and he is able to push this team forward and kind of reinvigorate them into a more aggressive team, they could end up turning into something similar to like a mini Boston. I think that they have, they could, definitely, they could shatter the paradigm, definitely. But there's a lot of asterisks that need to be checked off. There's a lot of planets that need to be aligned. So can it happen? It definitely can, but that's where I would look towards to kind of really spice up this Boston dish. I need that bench to be peppered in a little bit more, because you have a lot of talent there, and they could definitely bring some things to the table that I think maybe the players that are on the roster right now are maybe they're burning out, maybe they're struggling with. It's hard to say, but changes are definitely, I feel like, in order.
And the Outlaws have kind of an interesting roster choice where they have a lot of specialists on their bench. Mm-hmm. And, Aron is, if I remember correctly, he's a pretty heavy Genji Tracer player, right? Plays a good amount of Genji. I think he's got a really decent amount of time on Tracer as well. I don't know how recent that was. Actually, you know what? Winston's Lab. Why not, right?
I feel like the last time we've seen him, it was probably Apex Season 4 at some point, and I don't think they made playoff groups. I'm not sure. It's been so long. But Apex Season 4 was probably the last time we've seen it. And, it's serviceable. I think it's actually pretty okay. So, again, that could be, what they need.
Who knows what he's been working on since then?
For sure. We look at Architect, right? We look at Architect in terms of his Apex performance, and he's a Genji player. He's a Genji one trick, great Genji one trick, but he's just a Genji. And then he comes to Overwatch League and has this hero pool or hero ocean. Who's to say that Arhan isn't the same way? I don't know that that's the case. It could very well be, but who's to say? Who's to know? Only probably Tyrong and Flame would be able to answer that question. So
it'd be really interesting. I would love to see. We've said this for a long time on the show that despite there being some brilliance for the Outlaws, like their lack of a clutching Tracer has just kind of seemed to really take. Matches they give opportunities for other teams to win matches that they probably shouldn't. I guess is the way that I would put it. Is that there's just a lot of those opportunities that if you had a dedicated Tracer, a lot of the fights go a lot differently.
Definitely. And that's what's interesting when you look at Stage 4 and the possibilities that could arise. Where, Brigitte comes in, Tracer takes another hit in terms of difficulty. I don't think she's going away anytime soon, but I think it really forces teams to seriously look at the Tracer player and go, is this or will this work in this, climate? Mm. And you could see teams like, off the top of my head, it's hard to say. I think that London in particular, I think they have two amazing Tracer players, but they have started to rotate off and started to flex off of putting Prophet specifically on Tracer.
Right.
And I think that's only going to continue. It started in Stage 1, if I remember correctly, and I don't think it's gone up anytime soon. So definitely in Stage 4. It could, again, lead towards, Outlaws having an opportunity to really succeed, and they can't squander it. I think Stage 3, they had the map pool, they had the heroes to be able to really leverage that, and it kind of failed. So I hope that Stage 4 looks better for them.
Well, Joe, we got to get out of here. I really appreciate getting to sit down and chat with you. Shower us with your knowledge. I appreciate it. Make sure everybody to go follow Joe on Twitter at Volamel. Got any good pieces coming up, dude? That you can talk about?
I have a very long piece in the works. It is finished. I don't want to spoil too much, but if you know what's happening this month, you maybe could piece those two kind of pieces of information together. Some interviews coming this week, hopefully some fun stuff later this week. But other than that, not too much. But enough about me. Go vote for KickedTripod to be USA Overwatch Committee. He needs those votes. I want you to vote. Uncle Sam needs you. Uncle Volamel needs you. Go vote.
You're the best, and that'll be in your PayPal later. Thanks a lot, Joe. We'll see you next time. My thanks to Joe for stopping by on the show. The best place to follow his work is following him on Twitter at Volamel. I want to take a minute to thank our many patrons. I'll be thanking them in two batches because we have so many, starting by who has supported the longest. And that goes in this order: Lister, Arden N, Jose P, Johannes B, Jeff N, Nathan P, Eric H, and Matt B. Thank you for your support. If you like the show and would like to support, head on over to patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. Check out our goals and perks and get involved. That's it for me. Follow me on Twitter at KickedTripod and vote for me for the Overwatch World Cup Community Lead by clicking on the link in the show notes below. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time for another episode of Overwatch League Daily.